Good evening. I'm Dave Good, Constituent Services Administrator for Chesterfield. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our host for this evening. But before I do, I'd like to go over just a little bit of housekeeping related to the format of the meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody to the fifth and final Budget Town Hall being hosted by each of our Board of Supervisor members. Tonight's meeting is being, of course, held here in the public meeting room with in-person guests, but also being held virtually via Facebook Live. So we also have an audience viewing from home. The meeting is also being streamed on the county's YouTube channel, as well as through Chesterfield Television, which is available on Comcast 98 and Verizon 28. In the back of the room, there's a sign-in sheet. If anybody is here in person, if they would please leave us your name and some contact information. We'll be glad to add you to our list to continue sending you information about meetings like this and many other things. But again, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're in the audience tonight and you'd like to come up and make a comment or ask a question, I would ask that you come up to the same mic that I'm at right now so that everybody who is here and all of those at home can hear you and see you clearly. If you're tuning in via Facebook Live, you can simply go to the comments feed and add your comment or question. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our host, who is none other than the Honorable Kevin Carroll, the Matoaca District Supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. It's my honor to be here as your host for the fifth and final Budget Town Hall meeting. As I hope you're aware, each member of the Board of Supervisors, as Dave said, has hosted a meeting to listen to and answer questions, from the people regarding Chesterfield County's proposed budget. And as Dave mentioned, in addition to those who have joined us in person, we have a virtual audience today. So no matter how you're participating, whether you're here or at home, I certainly appreciate your taking an interest in the county and in the budget process and giving your input as we move forward. Tonight with me up here, you'll see to my left, Dr. Joe Casey, our County Administrator, and to my right, Mr. Gerard Durkin, our Director of Budget. Got that right, didn't I? Yes. All right, and Management. And then also Ryan Harter, who is the Matoaca representative in Chesterfield County for the school board. Thank you for being here. In a moment, Mr. Durkin is going to run through a brief presentation on the budget, and then we'll work to answer any questions that the community might have. Tonight's meeting is but one way to engage with the Chesterfield on the proposed budget. I and my fellow board members are scheduled to hold a hearing on March 23rd, tomorrow night, prior to adopting the balanced budget, which should be sometime in either early April or late April, depending on my opinion on what the state does with their budget. At any time, you may visit the special website we have devoted to the county's budget process, which is blueprint.chesterfield.gov, where you can also submit any comments. I believe that this proposed budget reflects our efforts to remain focused on long-term goals while also placing an emphasis on a tax relief across the board. Last year when we talked about taxes, one of the requests that I had moving forward into this year is that we would do an across-the-board look at how we actually tax the people in Chesterfield County, and so we've really done that this year. I commend staff for their efforts, and I really think that we've done a comprehensive look, and I think it has the ability, and we'll touch base on this a little bit later, to affect each and every person in Chesterfield County, not just one group. Obviously last year, the housing market, for lack of a better term, had a very robust and up year to the tune, quite frankly, that we added $6 billion to the land book value in Chesterfield County. And houses were actually selling sight unseen. People were putting bids in on houses without even seeing them. And there were bidding wars. And this certainly drove up the assessed value of the residents and commercial property in Chesterfield County. And we kept an eye on that. And so when we advertised the rate this past year, we actually advertised it at a lower rate. So we've taken a lot of this information into consideration and have taken significant steps to lessen the tax burden that could have been increased through the tax bills, while still remaining focused that we have a government to run. There are services and needs of the community that we have to provide, both on all sectors, not just on the county side, but on the school side. And still, as always, continue to provide the outstanding service to the community that they expect from our county employees. We remain committed to our long-term goals, and tonight, prior to taking questions, you're going to hear about our historic investment in schools, what we're doing to recruit and retain the best employees to serve you, the community, a $540 million bond referendum, $1 million bond referendum we're planning for this fall, and again, a broad look at tax relief. I think it was to the tune of, what, $56 million less? $52 million than what it could have been. And so anyway, moving forward, I would ask Mr. Durkin to proceed with the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carroll. Good evening, everybody. The fiscal year 2023 budget that is before the Board of Supervisors coalesces around the 4 key areas that you see on the slide before you. Our historic investment in our school system, employee recruitment and retention, the $540 million bond referendum that Mr. Carroll just referenced, and also the broad tax relief program, the largest that we've had in the county's history. This tax relief package, you can see all the actions that the board have taken since December and is also included in the proposed budget, is really the core of the fiscal 2023 budget. The actions that the board have taken since December and with this budget translates into a tax relief program of about $52 million, or another way of looking at it, an average of about $300 per household. I will talk about the real estate and personal property in a second, but I do want to draw attention to the final bullets on the list there. The personal property tax exemption for vehicles, we have increased from $1,000 to $1,500, the first amendment to that program since 1998. The elderly and disabled tax relief, we adjusted all of the tax brackets, the first that we've done that in over a decade, by 6% to match the Social Security cost of living adjustment. The business license tax, we increased the threshold from $300,000 to $400,000, which now means that 2/3 of businesses located within Chesterfield are now exempt from this tax, and over 2,000 businesses see a $100,000 drop in their tax base, which translates to about an average of $2,000 per savings per business. And in this budget, you'll recall that we increased the vehicle registration fee back in 2015 to help with some transportation projects. The budget that is before the board is proposed to reduce that from $40 to $20, the equivalent about 1.5 cents on our real estate rate, and also proposes to transfer the entirety of this revenue over to our capital improvement program to fund road and sidewalk projects. So the chart before you is a kind of short history of our real estate rate. As Mr. Carroll referenced, we've had a robust real estate market in the county over the last year, but that's not a unique phenomenon just to us. It has been happening nationwide. Recognising the impact of those assessments, the board earlier this year set the maximum tax rate at 93 cents. The proposed budget that is now before them was able to take another penny off to 92 cents. That's the lowest on record, as you can see from the chart in front of you on the far right. One of the things that we do when we build a budget every year is feed all of our revenues through a 5-year plan to make sure that all of these adjustments are sustainable through that 5-year rate period. And you can see also that the reduction that's proposed is in line with what we did back in the 2007-8 era. The main difference being this time is that, we're not seeing a bubble on the horizon. National forecasters are seeing, or are forecasting, I should say, that the market will return to kind of longer term averages, and that is what we think will be happening as well over the 5-year period within the county. We are not forecasting to see large year-over-year increases like we did back in 2008, 2009. So the December action, as I said, increased that threshold from $1,000 to $1,500 for personal property tax relief. 14,300 vehicles will no longer pay that tax as a result of that action. But also recognising that personal property values have been increasing. we did explore ways of providing relief for this June's personal property tax bills. And what you can see in the chart before you is a history of personal property tax relief. That was a program instituted by the state. We have received the same amount to relieve personal property bills since the inception of this program, about $41 million a year. As the population in the county has grown and more vehicles are in there, the percentage that's been able to be relieved off of people's personal property tax bills has lowered over time, as you can see on that chart. Originally, it was able to relieve about 70%. And we are forecasting a slight surplus for fiscal year 2022. So we decided that we could take this unique approach in actually increasing the relief from 46% to 55%. If we had continued with the state formula, we'd have actually seen that drop from 46 to 40%. So an effective increase in that relief of about 15%, and a minimum of about $15 million in tax relief that's being returned to our citizens in the upcoming June personal property tax bill. So the chart before you is another way of looking at the dollar bill graphic that we've presented in years past. You can see the largest single expenditure that makes up the general fund budget is our transfer to schools, which is projected to increase by $18 million this year. I'll go into schools in a few more minutes. A quarter of the general fund expenditures are going towards our public safety agencies, including police, fire and sheriff, and about 9% is going to our capital expenditures, including for some one-time projects. But in essence, those three buckets alone account for over 3/4 of our general fund expenditures. So the fiscal year 2023 budget is expected to increase by about $98 million, or just a little over 12%, recognizing that that is a larger increase than normal. I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of break down what's driving that increase. And first, you can see on the left of the chart, the largest bucket is our investment in the workforce. Last year, the board implemented the public safety pay plan with the intention of doing a remaining pay study for all general government employees. Having worked with the out consultant, we never endeavour to be the pay leader, but we do have to recognise market competition, and that we are now facing competition from non-traditional competitors. Additionally, our proactive approach with the public safety pay plan and pay structure, the market's actually moved again with our regional competitors, especially in regard to starting salaries. The budget that now therefore proposes an additional $12.5 million across the public safety agencies to ensure that our pay remains competitive in the region. Secondly, we've made some great strides with our capital improvement program over the last few years, especially in the arena of major maintenance. As service demands grow and our facilities age, we are increasing our investments in major maintenance, as well as a variety of projects around the county. I'll go into the referendum a little bit later, but this capital improvement program also does include one-time expenditures, you can see there, for about $13.4 million, which does include an upgrade to our financial system, as well as shared warehouse facilities with schools. Speaking of schools, this budget proposes an increase, as I said, of an $18 million transfer, which will help them achieve many of their goals. As a part of our fiscal year 2021 year-end results, the county did make a one-time infusion of $27 million into the school's supplemental retirement program, which freed up about $12 million a year in recurring operating dollars. So effectively, another way of looking at this is that the effective increase to schools has been about $28.8 million in this budget. Finally, I would like to draw attention to the additional funding request bucket that you can see on the bottom right of about $7.6 million. We do make strategic investments every year as part of our budget. We have, as I say, about $7.6 million, but this is lower than it has been in years past, recognising the competing pools that we have on the same dollar, and about a third of that actually has been driven by increased costs with our contracts. So employee compensation, the 23 budget that is before the board really approaches a kind of a 2-5-2 phase for general government employees. General government employees received 2% back in February. Some employees will go to a new kind of $12 to $16 minimum pay structure, or a 5% flat adjustment that's starting in July, and then with an additional increase of about 2% in next February. For public safety, we will continue with the step increases to avoid compression creeping back into our public safety agencies, as well as awaiting the final results of the public safety study, which will ensure that our starting salaries align with our new regional minimums. And then we couldn't achieve everything that we wanted to achieve in fiscal year 23's budget, so we are looking at doing a phase 2 of that as part of our fiscal 2024 budget development. So, as I said, we have about $7.6 million in general fund enhancements. You can see they're kind of covering 5 areas of the organisation. Our continued commitment to public safety. One of the examples that we have in there is an expansion of the police service aid programme. There are currently 19 positions. This 5-year plan proposes adding an additional 3 per year. Strengthen our infrastructure and facilities. As I said, we have many more facilities coming online over the next few years, so we do have increased staffing levels in our building and grounds, covering kind of custodial, HVAC maintenance and full-time trade positions. And quality of life, last year as part of our fiscal year 2022 budget, we did increase park staffing in the Parks and Recreation Athletic Field crew. This budget continues that with an additional 3 positions in fiscal 23 and 24, and also continues the part-time to full-time conversion ratio in our library system. Last year we included an additional 7 positions for that, recognising that we had a kind of 2/3 to 1/3 ratio of part-time to full-time positions, and proposing to add an additional 35 full-time librarian positions over the course of the next 5 years. Emphasis on customer service. Some examples that we have there will be the introduction of a taxpayer portal where businesses and residencies can go and look at their bills online and submit returns, as well as some additional positions in communications and media to enhance our outreach and engage more proactively with the community in that kind of 2-way dialogue, as well as some staffing enhancements to our Treasurer's office. And then finally, some investments in support services. One of the things I'll point out here is investment in our employee medical centre. That has seen some great demand over the last 2 years from both county and schools employees, and we are proposing to include a customer service representative and a nurse practitioner as part of this budget. One of the things that we haven't really talked about in the past that we are published in our document this year is we do get a lot of unfunded requests. The total additional funding requests came to just over $18 million. As you'll see from the charts before, we were only able to fund about $7 million of that, which left about 11.1 that we couldn't unfund. That covered the gamut of all departments in the organisation, from Parks and Rec to Sheriff to Police and IT, and it meant that we couldn't fund an additional 81 positions. That doesn't mean to say that it's not needed in the organisation, but with the same competing pool on that door, there had to be some compromises made. On the capital side, there was about just under $250 million in unfunded capital requests that we weren't able to fund over the course of the 5-year plan, including, as you can see there, some vehicles for police, additional park sites, fire stations, and some facility buildings for the sheriff. And as always, we publish in our document the list of unfunded transportation projects around the county. That list is still over $4 billion. But the main thing to take away from this slide is that, in our document for the first time, we have published by department, by request, and the amount, things that we weren't able to fund that we have never really traditionally put a light on before. So developing the fiscal 2023 budget, even with the last couple of years, is actually many unknowns we faced while developing this budget. We've had some significant labour market fluctuations. We've had inflationary pressures, as I'm sure you're all aware. And then, of course, the geopolitical unrest, which, if it continues on, is forecasted to have a deleterious impact on the inflationary scene over the next year or so. That being said, the budget that is before the board has been developed with some flexibility in mind. We do have some sizable increase in pay-go, or another way of putting it, cash contribution to our CIP. That does include funding for our new district enhancement programme and seed money to kind of jumpstart on the referendum projects in terms of design and acquisition and engineering. As I said earlier, we do have that merit adjustment in the budget for February of 2%. And then we fund our long-term liability contributions each year. We have in the budget above what the minimums are, just to ensure that we retain a high level of funded status. And then we also have a conservative approach to state and personal property tax collections. As Mr. Carroll referenced, there's still a lot of uncertainty at the state level. We'll wait to see how that will impact us over the next few weeks. And then with interest rates, investment income has seen an increase in the last few years, but with the changing kind of monetary policy landscape, we've had to dial that down to reflect current market conditions. So the next chart you can see before you is a general government spending per capita, but what we've done is we look at it from an inflation-adjusted perspective, especially with the current inflationary climate going on. In essence, that means what is the real cost of running the government? As you can see, the orange dotted line in the chart is the post kind of 2007-8 average. You can see that when the recession hit, that spending declined. It has started to creep up in the last couple of years, but it's still not at that average level. And if you go back further, we're effectively operating at 1992 levels. It really is a testament to the board's commitment to maximising taxpayer dollars while continuing to maintain the high levels of service that our citizens demand and expect. Then it's kind of similar chart here for the schools. It kind of follows a kind of similar trend to the county in that when the recession hit, that spending went down. It has started to go up, as you can see, at a kind of faster clip than the county in the last few years, but it's still not back to that post-recession average. And I would like to point out this is actually based on a local contribution to the school system. But at this time of year, we always talk about the transfer to schools and what it's increasing by, but budgeting is a kind of year-round exercise, and we do provide support for our school system in many ways. As I said, we have that $18 million increase in this proposed budget with the cash infusion to our SRP, Supplemental Retirement Programme. That is an effective increase of $28 million. There are some actions that we've taken, and especially in operating capital and kind of one-time funds. When we had to reduce our budget in fiscal year 21 because of COVID, we were actually able to still increase the transfer to schools by $10 million, despite reducing the overall county budget by $51 million. Last year, we had an $18 million transfer increase to the school system. On the capital side, the county aggressively took the opportunity to refinance outstanding debt with the low interest rate environment. We were able to do some stuff for schools because of that. You can see the $58 million for major maintenance that we were able to do in fall of 2020, the largest infusion that we've made into schools major maintenance. Last month, we had closed on the Virginia Public School Authority bonds. That actually allowed us to accelerate 2 middle school acceleration projects. As I said earlier, we do have $12 million and $8 million in our capital improvement program for our financial system, as well as a joint warehouse. Those are both projects that the schools will take part in, that the county is solely funding at 100%. And with the recent land purchases that we have made at Spring Rock Green and Upper Magnolia, potential future sites for school facilities, we have paid for that out of our year-end surpluses with no ask of the school system. Then finally, you can see the bottom 3 points down there. We were able to use a lot of our own federal dollars that were given to us to transfer that over to the schools, including $28 million from our CARES and $25 million of our American Rescue Plan Act money. And again, as part of that, including the $27 million for the retirement program, all in all, about one-time funds of about $80 million that we were able to transfer. So coming to the referendum, after a pause over the last couple of years, we are now full steam ahead in planning for the next referendum. The pause has actually helped us in many ways, as it's allowed us to kind of define the project concepts, costs and locations more clearly than we had 2 years ago. And then also able to receive feedback and prioritization from our employees, elected officials, residents and businesses. To ensure that there are projects that have something for everyone everywhere in the county. We are proposing to have a ballot at the end of the year, but there are some highlights in this referendum, as you can see. For fire, we are proposing the replacement of Chester and Ettrick fire stations, amongst others. For police, we are proposing to build 4 new police stations around the county, which actually have the added benefit of getting us out of some operating leases, which will enable us to reinvest those funds in operations for the county. And then for parks, we will continue with our enhancements to River City that has generated a lot of sports tourism revenue and had a positive impact in the region in the last few years. There are some boat launches at Falling Creek and James River, and also a development of a softball complex at Horner Park as well. So what you see before you is a timeline that is in our capital improvement program over the next 5 years, and with the variety of projects that will be happening around the county, as I said, from River City to Horner Park to the fire station and police stations in fiscal year 27. On the top right, you will see what the next steps are, and we do have the capital improvement program public hearing tomorrow night. We will petition to add the question to the ballot in August, with a public engagement campaign running through June through the end of October. Then finally, just a couple of minutes on our utility rates. You can see on the chart on the left the proposed fiscal 2023 water and wastewater rates based monthly residential charge based on the average usage. That is projected to be about just over $60. The other three localities listed on there, those are the same rates for fiscal year 22. So even with our numbers being a year ahead on that chart, we are still the lowest in the region. And with that, this is the final public meeting for this budget season. Tomorrow we will have the public hearing on the budget and the CIP, with adoption hopefully by April 6th. In the meantime, we always welcome feedback, as Mr. Good has pointed out, anytime through our email at blueprint@chesterfield.gov. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back to Mr. Carroll for any questions and comments.
Great. Thank you, Gerard, for that summary of what the budget is. I think if you want to read the first question, it'd be great.
Sure. The first question we received is, what can be done to reduce the debt service costs from approximately $1,000 per student? Can repayment of debt be accelerated? As part of, the county is one of the few localities in the nation that has the kind of gold standard of bond ratings, that kind of triple A rating. The way we have structured our debt repayment schedules, we do work very closely with our independent financial advisor to continuously look at our debt structure. As I mentioned earlier, we do take aggressive opportunities where we can to refinance that debt to lower levels to ensure that we are still able to invest in our facilities, but also at the lowest cost possible.
Mr. Durkin, if you could just clarify too, the 1,000 per student versus the 1,000 per maybe citizen that they were referencing. So I think we just have to do the denominator they were using was for students. But we typically refer our debt service policies on per capita.
Yes.
Next question.
The next question we received is, what is the county investing to increase the stock of affordable housing for low-income families? The part of the allocation that we had received as part of the American Rescue Plan Act does include $4 million to devote to accelerating affordable housing projects around the county. In addition to this kind of one-time use of federal funds, the Department of Community Enhancement does devote its efforts to affordable housing through the Community Development Block Grant and Housing Opportunities Made Equal programs year-round.
I think the other thing, too, is in Ettrick, we have last year, well, I guess it was the year before, designated land from the old Ettrick Annex to the Maggie Walker Land Trust. And in that process, working with the Maggie Walker Land Trust, there will be 10, I believe, houses built. Down there that will actually be affordable housing. And we're in the process of, I think we've actually put it out for bid, and the contract's been awarded, I think, and at least for the infrastructure part of it. And so that we look forward to seeing how that process moves forward. And if it's successful, which I believe it will be, we may explore similar processes in the future where we can have opportunities for these houses again. And my understanding from the last meeting when we were briefed on it, these are houses that, when you look at them on the surface, the cost would be around $300,000 or plus. 14, 15, 1,600 square foot houses. But because the land is owned by the Maggie Walker Land Trust, it reduces the cost of the house up front. And then there's been other funds that have been matched, which should reduce the cost of the house roughly around, I think, $150,000, $175,000 per house, which is well below what other houses are selling for in Chesterfield County. And so this is one effort that the county's moved forward with to try and provide additional affording housing, and this is certainly down in Ettrick, where we look forward to when the project, when the first house is built. Is there anybody from the community here that wants to come up and speak or ask a question? People who are in person? Nobody wants to come up and speak?
Are you talking about just Ettrick or anyone?
Anybody from the community here?
Of course, yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Ryan, Joe, Kevin, Gerard. I should tell you that I was leaving the meeting yesterday, and a group of the PTA parents were saying what a great accent you had, and they said that they'd be willing to listen to you say anything. So you have a significant fan base. Just be warned. I'm Ben Pearson Nelson. I'm president of the Chesterfield County Council of Parent-Teacher Associations. I'm here on behalf of that association. We have more than 8,000 members in Chesterfield County. We have close to 200 officers who serve our community. The mission of the PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. Almost all of our members work full-time and are raising kids, so it's difficult for them to get to public meetings. So on your behalf, we've collected petition signatures and public comments to help inform your decision about increasing school funding. Currently, I have 127 signatures and comments from your constituents in Matoaca, and I will email those to you after this meeting. On February 16th, our PTA officers voted to support the superintendent's needs-based budget. To be clear, we did not vote to approve this budget because it meets the goals of our association. Rather, we voted to support this budget because it's the least we can do to support the education of our children. A needs-based budget is meant to help our schools survive, but not to help our students thrive. I'm continually embarrassed that we invest less in our children than any other similar district in Virginia. Our per capita spending has fallen below per capita spending in the state of Alabama, and we are just ahead of Mississippi. Even if the superintendent's needs-based budget is fully approved, our kids will remain in last place. Many of our members and officers are frustrated and burned out from the last 2 years. Our teachers report increased disciplinary problems, lower math and reading scores, and greater mental health needs. And while our needs have increased, the resources we have next year will be reduced. Our greatest concern is the dramatic increase in our loss of teachers. We currently have around 200 openings for teachers in Chesterfield County. We'll need to hire an additional 700 teachers this summer to cover our classes for next year. We are directly competing with Henrico and other regional school districts for a small pool of teachers. Virginia did not produce enough teachers to cover the open positions prior to COVID, and it has gotten much worse. This year, a new teacher in Chesterfield will be offered $46,000. A new teacher in Henrico will be offered $49,481. If we are going to reduce the lasting damage from the teacher shortage crisis, we need to get ahead of this problem now. The good news is we know how to solve this problem. The increase in wages for both bus drivers and substitute teachers, which you helped with, demonstrated that people respond to the positive reinforcement of being paid well. We ask that teachers be paid like the professionals they are so that we can stop the brain drain from our schools. Local tax revenues are at an all-time high, so we can finally make this investment. We can pay our teachers what they deserve, and we can get our kids out of last place for funding. And the other piece of good news is that the citizens of Chesterfield support significantly increasing education spending. If you recall, the last time we did a petition drive, we collected over 8,000 signatures from Chesterfield residents that said they wanted our schools fully funded. This year, we have collected close to 1,000 signatures from Chesterfield residents asking the Board of Supervisors to fully fund our schools. Kevin, we're asking that you advocate for us. Advocate for our parents, our teachers, and our children. Advocate for our community. Strong schools make strong communities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. My name's Fred DeMay. I'm from the Matoaca district. I've attended a few of the meetings, so I'm now pretty well informed. I'd just like to take a quick second here, though, to thank Ms. Haynes for giving me some information yesterday at the Midlothian meeting and clarify a couple of my questions. And I'd also like to commend Ms. Haley for her discussion yesterday on the $8.5 million difference and the issues that the county is looking at to try and build a sustainable budget with these tax rate cuts. Chesterfield's traditionally been a high-cost, high-tax county in central Virginia, and we're facing some pretty extraordinary times coming off the COVID issue, and now we're facing massive inflation. Mr. Durkin, you mentioned it's 40-year high plus. So we're under a lot of stress. Everybody's under a lot of stress. And I believe that what you're doing and going about this is the right way to go. We need to see some tax relief out here. And interestingly enough, I had written an email to the 5 school board members. This was prior to seeing Dr. Casey's proposal for another 1 cent cut, which I strongly recommend and urge you to do. Asking school board members to consider a 2 cent reduction, in their budget to allow us to reduce the taxes down to 91 cents. Nobody took that. And the point I was trying to make with that is that currently, I believe, Mr. Durkin, you commented it's 28% of households have children in the school system?
It's just a little north, over 27, yes.
About 27, okay. So we're looking at roughly 72% of people who don't have children in school systems, but are paying the bulk of the taxes for the schools. And that's a good thing because, as people are saying, we need to have a good education system, but we need to do it at a reasonable cost. I've talked with several teachers. I have a teacher in the family. And interestingly enough, over the holidays, out at some get-togethers, I asked teachers, do you feel that you're underpaid? Do you feel that the school system isn't doing enough for you? One issue did come up, and that was compression. We face compression where I work, trying to hire new hires that come in within a few dollars of people who have been working 20 years. It's a bad situation, but I believe the county and the school system has gone about trying to address that fairly well. But the second issue that I heard from people was they were very concerned about the policies of the school board and the school system. We saw some pretty big problems occur, things with COVID, and beyond that, we had the masking issues. But what I'd like to do is just give an example of several years ago, there was a big issue. Some special interests wanted to change the bus routes, change the number of buses. And there was back and forthing with this, and eventually they decided to do it. I believe that was a poor decision. People talked about things like circadian rhythms and stuff. Oh, yeah, that's all well and good, but children have been getting up, since the crack of dawn for thousands of years. So I don't know that that was enough to redo that whole system, which added considerable cost. It added school bus drivers, and it added a lot of consternation to a lot of people in the county because it was upsetting childcare and this and that. Now, does the school system have, an obligation for childcare? No, they really don't. But I thought that was a bad policy then, and it turns out several years later here, as we ran into COVID. Now, nobody could foreseen COVID, but somehow bad decisions and bad policies come back to bite us. And when we ran into a situation where we were short on bus drivers, we were long on more routes, and the whole thing snowballed out of control such that the school board had to come to you, the supervisors in the county, and ask for help with funds to pay extra for the school bus drivers. You need the drivers. You had to pay. But my concern is that when I hear this 200 teachers being let, a lot of teachers left for policy concerns, not money, policy concerns. So I would strongly urge people on the school board to examine their policies. Years ago, I believe it was 2014, I think it was Diane Smith was chairman of the school board, and I had lobbied her at one of these public meetings to consider dropping her 7-year requirement for building new schools, setting it back to maybe 9 or 10, and at that time saving the county from having to raise the tax rate. She did. So I think that there's a precedent of good management in the school system. I just believe that right now, with the situation that we're in, with the finances here, and the moving inflation, the high cost of fuel, that what you're doing on the county side is a very prudent and, as Ms. Haley said, sustainable approach to putting forth a balanced budget So I would strongly urge you to go with the county's budget as it is now, including the 1 cent, because this affects all the taxpayers. And we certainly do need a break now. I mean, nobody can deny what's happening in the economy. And I certainly want to commend Dr. Casey and his staff for combing through this budget and finding a number of areas where they could economize and they could reduce the rates. They've done a good job. Mr. Carroll, I would strongly ask you to pass the budget as they have
Thank you, sir. I think we have some online questions. Can we scroll back up? The ones, oh, is this the ones we have not answered right here? What will be the plan for funding new school construction if the bond referendum does not pass? Which one?
Sure. Well, again, I would not be proposing the bond referendum in a vacuum without the full faith and confidence of a school board and a board and citizens and business groups coming together. But having said that, the fact of the matter is, under the state of Virginia, if there's an essentiality to a project, and again, a school needed if there's overcrowding, a police precinct where we need to strategically locate one, the rules of Virginia right now is you can access state funding, perhaps at a higher interest rate. That's why we do bond referendums also, is to access the lowest AAA bond rated rate. You have to basically wait 3 years for the financing. So all things considered, we would have to go into a very strategic mode to reprioritize the entire referendum list and see what we would come out of the box with in 3 years for a financing and what cash we could put forth initially to get certain things started that were completely essential. Having said that, again, I'm a county administrator. I defer to Board of Supervisors of the will of the people and what they want or don't want. I think we would have to gauge exactly what component of the referendum may have been wrong and what component of the referendum may have been right, and better understand that and present that up through our school board and board. That's just the county administrator's perspective.
Thank you, sir. The demand indicators report shows Cosby High School will be 150% over capacity by 2026. Is a new high school in the referendum, and is a timeline for that high school established? So I think that if you've been following the news, you will see that we have this zoning case, Upper Magnolia East. In the Upper Mag East case, I will say initially the concept was to put 3 schools in a school campus and a library, and that would have been an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school, and a new public library. We desperately need, in that area, because of overcrowding at the middle schools, a reliever for Tomahawk. And so the county's moved forward, and I think it was earlier in the program, we showed that we've issued bonds to $136 million, I think, and also going to utilize some ARPA funds for the infrastructure to actually fast track and get the middle school built as quick as possible. The problem, when we looked at that case overall, when you look at the traffic impact that an 1,800 student junior high school and a 2,400 student high school would have on those roads, it's too much. And so when you talk of where we're trying to put this is off of Otterdale Road and Duval Road. And so when you looked at the numbers, the decision was made that we need to move the high school somewhere else, that the capacity would be okay for the roads for the middle school, elementary school, and public library. And so we have land in the west side of the Upper Mag West piece that we will be able to find a spot, if necessary, to put a new high school. But there's some other measures that the county is taking place right now, actually, to kind of relieve some of those issues. One, the CTC Hall on Hull Street is going to be repurposed. Currently, right now, the school board administration occupies quite a bit of that building. And when the county purchased Spring Rock Green, part of what's going to go in that development is commercial office space. And our plan is to eventually move the school board leadership, not just from CTC Hull, but the other locations where they're at, and have them all under one roof finally, which has been a long time coming, and we've actually tried to find other locations to do this. But that will allow for the school system to look at repurposing of all of CTC Hull, not necessarily putting it as a high school, but there are other programs, and I think Ryan can speak to that in a minute, if you like, that would help relieve some of the capacity at some of the other schools. The other thing to take a look at, quite frankly, is that online learning has changed how parents and students learn. I think I saw in one of the other meetings, one of the ladies was very nice that she was very happy that she had her children home, but then she was like, but I don't want to teach them. And so I understood exactly what she was saying. But there are some children that actually did very well under the online learning component. And so there will be an opportunity for students, especially in the high school level, to actually have online learning, which could, if managed properly, relieve some of the overcrowding in some of the schools. But Ryan, do you want to talk to CTC Hull, please?
Sure. A couple things to digest there. You're correct that once we are able to move staff out of the top floor of the technical center, we're going to be able to put roughly about 1,000 more students that will be able to participate in a program, in a technical program. We're looking and working with a number of different vendors with programming, trying to mirror some of the same stuff that's going on down the Code RVA right now, currently. But it is important to understand that those 1,000 positions will be shared across the entire county, so students from every high school will be able to apply to that. So that will provide some relief across the entire county to some of the high schools. But we still do know that our projected enrollment is still going to continue to increase in the western corridor. So a high school is on, as Mr. Carroll said, we looked at a number of different locations. We're still working through that, where would be a good place. Originally, putting all 3 schools on the same site would have been ideal, but it just doesn't look like it's going to work out that way. But a high school out there in the western part of Matoaca is definitely on our radar. We do have a virtual school that we stood up this year, and it's the Chesterfield Virtual Academy. And we have roughly about, in the ballpark, 1,700 kids that participate solely online. But that is a school that we were able to kind of pull up out of thin air to relieve, to free up about 1,700 seats. We also have, for high school students, we have CCPS Online. That's been a program for over 10 years in the county, where it's almost self-paced modules with some teacher support, where students, if they want to work ahead or, to do some more advanced work, are able to do that. But we were never able to get that down to our middle school or even to our elementary. The virtual academy is catching all of our children that are within elementary and middle school. And we're, of course, looking to expand that, because the more students we could have that would like to participate virtually, that are doing well and thriving, which, the past 2 years has taught us that, some students succeeded with online learning, remote learning, and some did not. But we know that even with creating this new school, we're still seeing some of our schools that are stressed, like Cosby, Tomahawk Creek, and Bailey Bridge in Manchester. So, but yes, by freeing up the top part of CTC Hull, we'll definitely be able to accommodate roughly about 1,000 kids that want to participate in that technical program.
Now, to get back to the rest of the question, which is the high school, proposed high school in the west part of the bond referendum? Yes, it is. Don't know what that timeline would be right now, but it's part of the bond referendum. And so if, in the fall, if the voters choose to vote yes for the bond referendum, then the high school for the western part will be in there. In the meantime, we'll be working with the schools to plan that. The good thing is that we already have models in place, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We actually have a model in place for the middle school, if I'm correct, right?
There's been 2, yes. There's been a proposal. We have awarded a contract for the architecture and design of the middle schools, which are going to be, we're going to be building up more. We're looking at 3 stories opposed to the traditional where we used to have 2 stories. Gives us less of a footprint on the building, and we're able actually to increase capacity of those schools.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Well, this next one's for you.
All right. So to speak to some policies available for special education students to access recovery of learning, as we went through the past 2 years, and we had to be remote for some time, some types of supports needed to be adjusted during those times, but, and maybe Dr. Tiles, you can give me a thumbs up if I'm correct, but at this time, all the services that would have changed before are pretty much back to where they are now and available. We will be always looking at ways to improve that more, and if we're missing the mark somewhere, we always do try to improve programs whenever we have financial capability and also the human resources to do it. What is my town hall? All right. Do the tech center students attend the center full-time? They do not. They attend at half-time, so pretty much even and odd days. So some of the days, it just depends on how it falls. They could be there 2 days a week, or they could be there 3 days a week. That's why when we were talking about the top floor of the Career Technical Center, we figure it would roughly be about 450 to 500 kids per day that we'd be able to fit into programs there. When you're looking at how they would swap between even odd days, that's how we'd be able to accommodate roughly about 1,000 students that'd be able to participate in that program.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else in the audience to speak? Bueller? Come on, that's funny. I don't care who you are. Bueller. Of course, the young kids are going, who? Perhaps any other questions online? If anybody at home has a question they want to submit in the portal. It's going to be the shortest meeting in history.
You want to speak?
I do. Sorry, I had to step out. Hello, and thank you. My name is Laura Abbott. I am a Matoaca resident. I'm a Chesterfield teacher. I'm a member of the CEA. I'm a parent of a student. I'm a spouse of a teacher. So we are very wrapped up in this community and very concerned about schools. And so as a parent, my daughter goes to Tomahawk. It's incredibly overcrowded, as you know, as you've already spoken to that. She's in line to go to Cosby. I taught at Cosby for 15 years. My husband teaches there now. Incredibly overcrowded. They had trailers in year 2. I am absolutely opposed to trailers. I don't think our students are safe in trailers. I don't think that the walls are thick enough. I would like to see that schools are fully funded to make sure that our students are learning in buildings, that our Chesterfield community knows that when they send their kids to school, they're inside a building and not in some rickety old trailer that could be moldy, and some have been. I also am concerned about not just overcrowding, but that we are fully funding all of the programs that our students depend on and our community depends on and needs. I heard somebody today talk about the fact that only 30% of Chesterfield residents actually have children in schools, but all Chesterfield residents depend on services such as EMS or whatever the service is. It doesn't matter. We want qualified people in any position. We want families that come into Chesterfield for the schools because we don't have much of a commercial sector. We don't have much of a business sector. We are residential. So we need those people to continue to come in, and we need those tax dollars. As far as tax dollars go, yes, there is inflation. However, I truly believe that we are actually doing quite well as a county right now, and now is not the time to make tax changes, but to support the community in every way we possibly can. So thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it, and you have a good night.
Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it. I will say, for those who are watching and for the teachers that are watching and people at home, that We last year hired a company to come in and do a pay study for public safety. And they came in, they did the study, and last year we implemented phase 1 of our public safety plan, and we also did a study for teachers, and we implemented phase 1 for teachers. And my understanding is the third leg of that study is the study that we now have received information from Evergreen on, which I'm in the process of going through. I do think that there should be parity within the county government, so that if we have someone who works in the school system who's in, we'll say, an administrative assistant position, and we have someone who's an administrative position of the same job description in the county side, then they should be fairly compensated on both sides. And so that's why I'm committed to looking at the study that came in from Evergreen to make sure that what they did is going to put us in that footing. And I look forward to working with the school board as that's reviewed to see how that fleshes out. But I think that the other thing that people need to understand is that, as mentioned in by previous board members, is that the state doesn't fully fund our school system. We have 600-plus teachers, I think it's maybe closer to 800, that we've received no compensation from the state for. And so I do appreciate people coming to us and lobbying for us, but I would really tell you what you need to lobby is the General Assembly. I did it for years on the public safety side. And it can be effective, but you got to get loud, and you got to get down there, and you got to knock the doors. The way to start here in Chesterfield County is to lobby all of our representatives in the House and Senate here in Chesterfield that represent you. There are 2 budget proposals right now, one from the Senate and one from the House. One benefits schools better than the other. And if you have not been watching those budget proposals, I highly recommend you take a look at them and make phone calls and ask the state to fund the schools. If we had the funding even for 50%, it certainly would help us meet what we're trying to meet here with our goals. But it's not just the school system that's not funded 100%. We have positions in the Sheriff's Department that are not funded by the Comp Board. We have positions in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office that are not, and all of our constitutional officers that are not funded by the Comp Board that the county picks up the compensation for. And in many cases, because we want to have equity through our system, those employees that work for us in those positions are also compensated from on the county side of compensation above and beyond what the state actually provides. And having worked in that system as a county employee for 32 years, I am fully aware of how all of this works. I lived it. As our other board members, are committed to making sure that we are competitive in our salary in the area. That's why we wanted to do a pay study. We hired a company to do a pay study, and I think it's worthy that we take a look at what they're recommending. I would tell you that last year, when phase 1 was discussed for the public safety side, we couldn't fund the whole thing. Couldn't do it. Had to do it in phases. And it may be a situation, and that's why we couldn't fund all of the teachers last year either, but we did it in phases. And we may have to do this other third leg in phases as well. And that's certainly something that we're going to look at comprehensively as a board. But keep in mind, Chesterfield County is the 4th most populous county in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The recent census put us at over 365,000 and plus, and I think the census is wrong. I think we're closer to 370. I've seen the growth in Western Hull Street. In the last 10 years, Hull Street growth has over 14,500 people have moved in the western part of Matoaca, over 16,000 total in Matoaca. And that doesn't include some of the apartment complexes and condominiums that have come out of the ground. Livingston Apartments was being stick-built when the census was done. There's 300 units, and it's fully rented now. If you've ever driven north on 288 and you look to your left at Commonwealth Center Parkway, you see a bunch of new condos going up there. And there's a lot of housing that's in the pipeline in the western part of Hull Street, as well as probably certainly we know in other parts of the county. And so that's already been approved in the timeline. So we are aware of all this, and we are trying to, that's why we're trying to move forward with the bond referendum to be able to get the money. And I don't know if you spoke to it or not, but we're pretty aggressive on what we want to do with the bond referendum and how we're going to pay it off and how quick we're going to do this. Why don't you talk to that real quick?
Sure. So typically when we've done bond referendum proposals in the past, we've looked at it kind of, 7 to 9 year time frame. To come back to the kind of debt question we had earlier, we looked with our financial advisors at our debt repayment schedules over the next few years, and we were actually able to speed up the proposed referendum from a kind of 7 to 9 year time frame to a 5 year time frame, all within this budget 5-year plan that's before the board now. We were able to stress test that through our 5-year plan, and it was eminently achievable. So we're able to condense that schedule over the 5-year time frame. Additionally, just really quickly, it's actually the first time since 2004 we've had it on the general government side. So that has been the first time in well over 18 plus years.
And if I could add to that, Mr. Durkin, one of our strategies in Chesterfield County, which is admired by many, including bondholders and the bond rating agencies, is we do level principal payments. It's a far more aggressive. Those that have a mortgage as a home, as you recall, those early payments, it seems like most of it is going to interest, little's going to principal. We reverse that. Our hardest payments are our first payments of the debt service cycle. So by the time we get in the out years, we have significantly paid down the principal. Therefore, the interest factor on such debt is as low as it could be. So what that does is gives us the capacity for a future debt issuance for a future need if there is such a need.
See, another question's come in the portal. It says the $28 million in tax reductions from the various types of relief, considering that the average homeowner will only realize a $33 tax decrease from the real estate tax and a maximum of $85 per vehicle, is giving up this funding in the best interest of the county. I think that when you look at what the interest rates may be doing, what the inflation is doing, what the cost of gasoline is now affecting people's home budgets. I think, especially when you talk about the car tax cut of $20 per car, depending on how many cars you have in the house, that makes a big difference. And so I think that, quite frankly, for years, we'll go back a few years, back in the 90s when the county was growing at a fast rate, we saw some really robust increases in the budget because the rates weren't necessarily cut. And I think that we have to be mindful of what's happening in our community and how, quite frankly, these increases are affecting everybody at home. And so, one of the things we don't have in Chesterfield County, as an example, and some people feel one way about it and some people don't, is a meals tax. I don't support a meals tax. That's me personally. Other people may feel the other way. But our fastest growing demographic in Chesterfield County is the over 50, right? It's the over 50 crowd, people with my color hair, and maybe more of it, I don't know. But so a lot of people on fixed income. We've also seen an increase in the last 10 years or so of people in the lower income brackets in Chesterfield County. And so when I look at this, when I look at the reason I thought it was really important to do the car tax relief is because that affects everybody. If what the callers, or the person who submitted is right, if you only cut the real estate tax rate, that only affects people who own houses. But people rent apartments and rent houses, the car tax cut actually affects them. And so, and all of the other across-the-board increases. And keep in mind, even with this, and again, we're talking about being the 4th largest, most populous county in the Commonwealth, 5th largest jurisdiction, we still add how much to the budget? 98 million dollars. That's a significant increase to try and fund the services that we have. And again, trying to concentrate on our core employees to make sure that we retain the best that we can and be competitive in our market. So I appreciate all the questions. And Joe?
And Mr. Durkin can correct me on the math, the $33 average tax decrease for a home, I believe that's just 1 penny's worth, is about $33. So if you have and that's, a penny per 100,000. So in essence, the savings on a $300,000 home is closer to $100.
And what's the average?
I think it's $325,000, so it's actually over $100. And I don't want to do the math on the $85, but there's a variety of ways in which savings can be in 2-car, 3-car households, high-valued cars, low-value cars below $1,500 that are not getting a tax bill, and the vehicle inspection or registration fee going in half. So the $85 may be right for that particular homeowner, but I know there are people going to be making a lot more savings than $85.
I mean, it's true that there are some people in Chesterfield County who do make more money, and we realize that. But there are those in the county who don't. And then we have to make sure that our taxes are fair across the board. And really, that's what the goal of the board is and what we're doing. So I do appreciate the question. Thank you. Any other questions from the community? Not seeing none, not seeing anything online. David, you have final comments?
Just wanted to thank everybody for their time throughout this series of meetings. As Mr. Carroll mentioned earlier, this was the 5th of 5 such meetings that we've conducted. Also, just want to remind everyone, if you have a question that you didn't submit tonight or you think of something later, please visit blueprint.chesterfield.gov. You can submit a question through that comments feed through that website, or simply email blueprint@chesterfield.gov. But again, we appreciate everybody's participation, including everybody who tuned in from home and also those who've been here in person over the last 5 meetings, as well as staff and local leaders for helping us make this happen.
And Dave, I got one last comment too. I think that, and this is, I think someone brought this up, that usually at the end of the year, there may be surpluses. And if there's surplus in the budget, we've been pretty consistent with this board that when the school comes forward with a request to utilize that funding, we've been very supportive of what they've needed. And so we don't know what that's going to look like. And it's not the best way to fund a sustainable budget, because if you put dollars set aside for salary and compensation, then that's permanently fixed in your budget. But then again, if something's moved forward and we can work with the schools to utilize those surplus funds in the best way possible, we're certainly going to do that, try to honor the requests as they come forward. So again, I thank the online question for that as well. So thank you, and we'll conclude the meeting tonight. Look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow night at the Board of Supervisors meeting. Thank you.